Apple just released macOS 13.3 alongside iOS 16.4 and updates for all other Apple operating systems, including the Studio display. So in this video, we're going to cover the new features, changes, and bug fixes. And by the way, some of these bug fixes are long overdue. So let's start off with the size of this update. And you can see here, it came in at 3.4 gigabytes on my M1 Max MacBook Pro, which is coming from the previous version. So now what's new here in this new macOS 13.3 update? And the first thing is a resolved issue where trackpad gestures may occasionally stop responding. So I had this multiple times on previous versions of macOS where my trackpad on my MacBook Pro would just stop working completely and it would come back maybe like 15-30 seconds later. Now, one of the biggest bug fixes in this update is this one right here that's mentioned in the release notes related to the task manager. So this fixes an issue that was introduced in macOS Ventura 13.1 that caused the system to post excessive background items added notifications after toggling items in system settings and then in general. So I'm gonna just go here for you and then in general and then right here under login items. So now in 13.3, we are not gonna have that issue anymore where we have excessive notifications popping up in the top right of the screen. This update also fixes the major bug where file sharing between Macs via SMB would just simply not work. So if you go into your settings and then go to general and then down to sharing right here, if you had this turned on for file sharing between Macs, that was completely broken in 13.2. You can see it mentioned here on the Apple forums and on Reddit and multiple other places. So many people reported that as being broken. Somehow mine was not broken, mine still worked. But if you did have issues with file sharing on 13.2, that has been addressed here in 13.3, according to everybody who had the issue previously. Also, if you had issues with the Windows Server memory leak, so if it took up a lot of memory here in your activity monitor, that appears to be addressed. Mine shows under 1 gigabyte right now, where sometimes it would show like 5 gigabytes. So at 572 megabytes, that's not bad. Even when I open up multiple windows, it doesn't show anything excessive here in my activity monitor. So that also appears to be addressed. There's also a fix for the ask to buy requests from children not appearing on the parent's device. So if you have that set up in your family settings, that was a bug previously, but that has now been addressed. And we also have a fix for the voiceover bug where it may be unresponsive after using Finder. I also noticed that macOS 13.3 fixes the trash bug that I had on pretty much every other version of macOS Ventura, where I would empty my trash and it would just say emptying for a long time until I manually, canceled that process. But now that appears to be patched here in 13.3. Now, as far as actual features go in macOS 13.3, I don't know why, but I just find bug fixes to be almost more important than features these days on macOS. But anyways, we do have quite a few new features here in macOS 13.3. So first off, you will notice that Safari has been updated to version 16.4, which is huge. We do get quite a few changes and a ton of bug fixes here in 16.4. So just in general, after updating, you will notice an improvement in Safari, not just for features, but also for performance. But anyways, if we go to the top right here, you will see we have 2 browser features. So we have added dark mode support for plain text files. So if you open up a plain text file, I'm just going to open this in Safari. That used to open in light mode even if you were in dark mode, but now if I switch to dark mode, you can see that this adjusts to dark mode as well. So that was a weird bug previously, but that has been addressed. And we do also have added fingerprinting countermeasures for querying the permission state of the notifications API. There's also several other features added with this update. So you can see the web apps. So we have added support for web push. That's of course the big feature for iOS. There's also added support for ID member and web app manifest files. You have the third-party browser support for add to home screen from the share menu. And if you just search for features on here, I will leave this linked down in the description below, but a ton of things have been added for the web API, JavaScript, CSS. You can see web animations, WebAssembly, a lot of changes to Safari extensions. Here's a big one, added improvements to audio quality for web video conferencing. So if you're like me and you use Google Meet, or if you use any other web video conferencing like on a website and not an application, you should see added improvements to audio quality just by updating and having Safari 16.4. We have added support to allow a site to provide an alternate URL to be used during AirPlay. For HTML, there's added support for lazy loading iframes, which are usually what hold in videos on websites. And again, you see all these JavaScript fixes and new features for forms and custom elements. You have so many here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It would take me all day, but tons of changes here in Safari 16.4. Again, I will leave this linked in the description below if you want to read through it. If we head into our settings and go down to displays and we go to advanced, you will see a new toggle up top that says show resolutions as list. And when you click on that, it will show all the resolutions here that you can adjust. You could also toggle on all resolutions to see every single resolution, not just the recommended ones. And that will just kind of replace the feature there before that just showed like more space, default, larger text, kind of a more technical way of having this laid out here. In the wallpaper section, you will notice some differences to the verbiage. So dynamic desktop is now dynamic wallpapers, light and dark desktop is now light and dark wallpapers, desktop pictures is now pictures, and so on. When you open up the podcast application for the first time, you will see this new splash screen that shows the new features. So we have channels in library, easily access followed shows and more from your channels, and also improved up next, resume episodes and remove any you want to skip. So if we go into here, you will see that if I go to my shows, before it would only say updated on the day of the week, but now you can see it shows updated 8 hours ago. This one is 5 hours ago. This one's 1 day ago. And it will also show how many you have not, watched yet. So if I go down here, you will see that we have 5 new for this podcast. So it'll show 1 day ago, and there's 5 that I still have not listened to. And then over on the left-hand side, we have a new section called channels. And this is going to allow you to see basically podcast hosts and podcast companies. This is like their artist page. So you can see all of the shows that specific podcaster or company has. So for example, if I go to Wondery right here, you will see they have 164 shows, but I'm only following the one, but I can still see all of their others with this new channels section. There's also some changes to the up next feature right here, the queue. And as Apple describes it, it says up next will now include episodes listeners have saved to their library and episodes that they play from shows they do not follow. We also get access to the 21 new emojis that also came to iOS, iPadOS, and all the other Apple operating systems. So you can see we finally get the pink heart, we get a new face, some new hands, some new animals. All of these have been added. And if we go back into our settings and go to accessibility and then to display, you will notice that we have a new toggle here for dim flashing lights. And it says video content that depicts repeated flashing or strobing lights will be automatically dimmed. So to show you how great this works, you can see I have this video right here playing. And if I go ahead and turn on dim flashing lights, watch how much this dims. It's almost black. So you can still see it very faintly, but it's not going to impact you, and you're definitely not going to have a seizure from being able to barely see these flashing lights. So this is a tremendous accessibility feature that has just been added here in macOS 13.3. And speaking of accessibility, if you are a VoiceOver user, there is now support added for the maps inside of the weather application. In the Photos application, duplicates are now supported with iCloud shared photo library photos. So not just your own private library, it can now detect the duplicates in your shared library as well. If we head into the Freeform application, we now have a new option for photos. So if we go ahead and put a photo in right here, and if we go up to Format, Image, you will see that we have a new option for remove background. So you can now remove the background from images straight from within the Freeform application. If we head into our Siri settings, we have 2 new languages for Siri here. So we have Arabic, and then we also have Hebrew. Both of those are new with this update. There's also transliteration support for these 3 different keyboards, and also new keyboard layouts for these ones right here. Also in the release notes, we have a new feature for Apple Silicon Portable. So I would assume this is just the MacBooks, and it says SD or SDX cards require user approval before the card can communicate with macOS. So I'm actually going to put in an SD card right now and see if this does happen with my SD card, even though it's been on here before. So yes, that is the new feature right there. It says allow accessory to connect. So it says, do you want to connect the SD card to this Mac? If I press on allow, it will allow me, and now I can read the contents of that SD card. And if you had issues where downloading iOS apps on your Mac failed while purchasing or restoring in-app content, that has been fixed. Now, as far as the performance and battery life goes, performance I feel like has improved just to the bug fixes alone. There's a lot of bug fixes, and also Safari got a ton of updates. So Safari is my personal browser of choice. So with all these bug fixes and all these new features, Safari is also also performing better than it did on previous versions of Safari and macOS. So I would expect performance improvements across the board. Again, I have been using the RC here for a while, and I have noticed performance improvements. Now, as far as battery life goes, I've not really noticed any battery life changes yet, but once I've tested the battery life even more for like a couple of weeks, I will give you guys an update if it's anything worth mentioning, like if it's much better or much worse. So now let's answer the question, should you update to macOS 13.3? And I say for sure. I mean, the Safari and WebKit changes, the important bug fixes, and especially for those security patches that Apple will be publishing in the coming days, I think it is definitely worth updating to macOS 13.3. So if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also, let me know your thoughts on macOS 13.3 down in the comments below. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.